Hello. Today let's talk about the beer quiche game. Now a long time ago there was a silly song or saying, I forgot which, that real men don't eat quiche. It didn't have any deep meaning, but it inspired games like the following. Let's imagine that nature makes a man either macho or wimpy. So in this version he's macho with probability 0.8 and wimpy with probability 0.2. Then that player, whom I'll call player 1, chooses what to have for breakfast. He can either have beer or quiche for breakfast. Now, if he's macho, he'd rather have beer for breakfast, while if he's a wimp, he'd rather have quiche for breakfast. Then he faces a bully. Now, the bully does not see what nature made him, but the bully does observe what he had for breakfast. Now, player 1 would always prefer that the bully doesn't fight him. The bully, however, really wants to fight player 1 if and only if player 1 is a wimp. So let's review again. First, nature makes player 1 macho or wimpy. Then player 1, after he finds out his type, decides whether to have beer or quiche for breakfast. A bully observes what player 1 had for breakfast, then decides whether to pick a fight with player 1. Player 1, therefore, has two objectives. First, he doesn't want to get into a fight, but second, he wants to have his first choice for breakfast. If you think back to high school, you can imagine that there are bullies out there that want to pick on you if you have certain traits. Now, if you have that trait, it might be worth it to fake not having, but that's costly to you. Faking not having a certain trait will impose some psychological cost on you. Plus, of course, it might not work. The bully might just pick on you anyway. So let's try to figure out what will happen. Why don't you pause the video and using all the numbers, try and figure out what should happen. Okay. Let me tell you what I think should happen. First, I picked the payoff numbers so that beer is a dominant strategy for player 1 if he's macho. You can see, right, the worst thing that can happen to player 1 if he drinks beer is that he gets into a fight and he gets 16. Whereas if he has quiche, the best thing is he doesn't fight, but then he only gets 10. So although player 1, if he's macho, does not want to get into a fight, beer is much more important to him than not getting into a fight. So he has a dominant strategy of drinking beer. Now, player 1, if he's a wimp, doesn't have a dominant strategy. See, if he has quiche, he could get 6 or 16, whereas if he drinks beer, he could get 10 or 0. So if player 1, for example, thought, well, if I eat quiche, I'm going to get into a fight, but if I drink beer, I escape the bully, then he would be willing to have beer. But if he thought, well, no, I'm going to get into a fight no matter what, then he would rather have the quiche. So what I think the bully is going to do, if the bully recognizes that player 1 who is macho has a dominant strategy of beer, but player 1, if he's a wimp, doesn't have a dominant strategy, will say, if somebody is going to eat quiche, it's going to be the wimp. And if it's the wimp, I want to fight. So the bully will say to himself, you know what, if I see a quiche eater, I bet I'm here, at which point I want to fight because I'm better off fighting than not fighting. And I don't think if I see a quiche eater that I'm over here. So I'm not going to worry about the fact that this number is lower than this number because I think, again, if I'm in this information set, I'll be here and be getting better off. So then player 1, if he's a wimp, he has to decide whether he'll have beer or quiche. And I think there is an equilibrium in which player 1, if he's a wimp, has beer. Because what will the bully do? Well, in this kind of equilibrium, the bully, if everyone drinks beer, if this is a pooling equilibrium where everyone drinks beer, the bully, because of the payoffs I picked, won't fight. Because the bully, right, I made this symmetric. You get here, if you're the bully, you get 1 more by fighting than not fighting. And if you're against here, you get 1 less by fighting than not fighting. But there's an 80% chance that nature made player 1 macho. So in a pooling equilibrium, everybody drinks beer. And the bully's like, oh, I gain no information from seeing what people had for breakfast because everyone's drinking beer. So I've got to go back to these basic probabilities. And I guess there's an 80% chance that if I pick a fight with somebody, I'm picking a fight with a macho guy, so it's not worth it. I get a lower expected payoff fighting than not fighting. So this is basically an equilibrium in which wimps hide among machos, that most people are machos. Wimps can perfectly fake being macho because the only difference is what you eat for breakfast. And wimps will fake being macho by drinking beer, and the bully will just give up. So this is a pooling equilibrium. Let's see why there's not a separating equilibrium, okay? So in a separating equilibrium, let's imagine now player one who's a wimp eats quiche. Well, what will have to happen is this isn't an equilibrium because there's basically a couple of problems. There's a problem here because now player one will end up getting 6 when he eats quiche because he'll end up in a fight. Furthermore, the bully would only not regret not fighting in this equilibrium because if only macho guys drink beer, then the bully will never fight someone who drinks beer. And player one who's a wimp will regret eating quiche. Right? So think why this can't be an equilibrium. It can't be an equilibrium in which only macho people drink beer. Because in that kind of equilibrium, the bully would regret fighting someone who drinks beer. But then player one who's a wimp is going to regret eating quiche because he'll know, wait a minute, if I drank beer, I could avoid a fight. And that's my first priority, is to avoid a fight. So this isn't an equilibrium. All right, let's go on to another of these games. And I made just one little change. I changed these numbers. So this used to be 0.8 and now it's 0.2. Please pause the camera or please pause the video and figure out what you think is going to happen. Okay. First, let's consider the possibility of a separating equilibrium. This can't happen really for the same reason it couldn't happen with the previous game. And that's because in a separating equilibrium, we're always going to have player one who is macho drinking beer because that's a dominant strategy. In a separating equilibrium, player one who's a wimp would have to have quiche. That means the bully would only not regret if he fought against a quiche eater and didn't fight against a beer drinker. But now player one who's a wimp regrets because he would have rather hidden. Okay? So now let's then consider, can there be a pooling equilibrium? If you haven't figured that out, why don't you pause the video and say, can there be an equilibrium where this is beer and this is beer? And the answer is no. There can't be an equilibrium where everyone drinks beer with these payoffs. Because if everyone's going to drink beer with these payoffs, the bully will then say, well, I gained no new information from watching what player one had for breakfast. Oh, but you know what? 80% of people are wimps, and I'm willing to take a chance. If 80% of people are wimps, that's worth it for me. If you were to calculate my expected payoff, if there's a 20% chance I'm here and 80% chance I'm here, I want to fight. So because of these payoffs and this pooling equilibrium, the bully always has to fight. But now player one who's a wimp, he regrets drinking beer. He's going to say, wait a minute. You're telling me I get in a fight no matter what? Well, if I'm going to get in a fight no matter what, I'm having quiche for breakfast, right? If I can't hide, hide among the machos in order to avoid being beaten up, I'm going to have what I want for breakfast. The heck with it. So that's not an equilibrium. So there is no equilibrium. Well, actually, there is an equilibrium, but it would involve mixed strategies, and it would involve player one who's a wimp sometimes going here, and the bully sometimes fighting and sometimes not fighting. And you'd pick the mixed probabilities just so player one is indifferent between going up and down, and the bully is indifferent between fighting and not fighting, but I'm not going to be doing that in these lectures. Thank you very much. Goodbye.